much, Jeff, and thank you all for letting me be a part of this conversation today. I want to give just a little bit of background because being in Arkansas and being a Japanese American and being from California, I think is all weird for people when I first meet them, especially in Arkansas. So Jeff and I met in San Jose when we did City Year together, and he was an amazing mentor, and I feel very lucky to have crossed paths with him in my professional career. We worked at K.R. Smith Elementary, and I think that is where I learned very quickly that I did not want to be a teacher. I did not want to work in like school administration, but I recognized the needs that so many students had that were going unmet, and was just heartbroken by that. So that took me in a path towards social work, and I ended up having a really cool opportunity to be a nanny for a family that was living in Arkansas. They paid for my schooling, they let me live with them, and I took care of their kids while they helped put me through school. So that's kind of how I landed here. Now, my mom lives with my husband and I, and we collectively have learned so much about our history in the state. There was a large population of Japanese Americans from Fresno, where I'm from, that were interned all over the United States. But there is an internment camp in Jerome, Arkansas, and that was where we found out my mom's dad and his family was interned. We visited the museum. I would be more than happy to share links to that site if you're interested. George Takei was also a person whose family was interned in the same camp. And as I'm learning about that, and as I'm learning about how we fit into the conversation just about equity and access, I can't help but remember this story we heard. And there was an art exhibit at the internment camp museum from Black families that lived in Jerome and saw how Japanese people were being treated. Many of the Black families did not have access to some of the foods that were being shipped into these internment camps for Japanese Americans that were held there. And I'm just saying that not to say that, Japanese internment was a walk in the park and everybody had a great time. What I'm saying is that there's inequity and just a history of inequitable distribution of resources, period, in our country. But in Arkansas, and what I'm learning about my history is just kind of guiding me more to be an advocate. I work with the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance. We're the statewide anti-hunger organization that works with all of the food banks in the state. And for folks that are not as familiar with food banking, food banks are really the warehouse where they purchase and preserve and organize all of the bulk items, and then food pantries are the recipients of that food. So typically, food banks are not the first go-to when you are a person who is struggling to keep meals for your family. You would go to a local food pantry. During the pandemic, we saw a huge decrease in the number of volunteers that were able to work at the food pantries for lots of reasons. The majority of food pantry volunteers are 70 plus. This is like a retirement role for them. We also saw, an increase in food insecurity and poverty, of course, and homelessness when the pandemic hit last year. But we have been struggling with food insecurity as a nation for a very long time. And when we talk about goals, we don't want to go back to 2019. 2019, there were Arkansas ranked, in the top 3 states that were food insecure. I always feel weird about like sharing that. It seems like it's a victory or something. It's really not. We're one of the worst states at feeding our residents. And just so we are all on kind of the same page about what food insecurity is, the definition that I'm working off of is food insecurity is when a person does not have reliable access to nutritious meals consistently. So, that could be a working family who, after they've paid all their bills and they've taken care of the needs of their kids and they've taken care of, some of the wants that their kids have, they might not have enough money at the end of the month to keep food on the table. But there's so much more that goes into access, right? If you are a person that has mobility challenges, then getting around and going shopping and bringing those items home can be a huge challenge. Transportation is a big issue. We have areas in the state that don't have broadband. So there are complete like dead zones in certain parts of the state where, even though we've passed online purchasing for SNAP participants, they can't take advantage of those things. So all of that to say that I'm really excited to talk about this with you all, because I hope that this can be a discussion. The program that I primarily focus on is SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. You all might have heard that they've increased the benefits, that people who were only receiving, not the maximum benefit, were bumped up to get the emergency allotments during the pandemic. There's a big fear right now within the anti-hunger community that we will see, once those allotments go away, we're going to see a big increase in the need. The other thing is that SNAP is the largest child nutrition program. 74% of the people, 74% of the households in Arkansas that receive SNAP are households with children. 1 in 4 kids in our state are food insecure, and 1 in 6 adults are food insecure. But SNAP has, understandably, just like all of our institutions and all of our institutions and all of our programs, there's a big racist piece of how these programs were developed. So the historical context is that America awards benefits to the deserving poor, not the undeserving. And we know that poverty is used as a proxy for race, and race-based hunger disparity is reflected in all of the data. We know that Black and Latinx families are 2 times more likely to struggle with food insecurity and poverty, and not because they made bad choices, simply because there are so many barriers to financial upward mobility, especially in some of these states that are in the South, but everywhere. Also, recognizing that it's a month to celebrate us. There's the Asian American population and Pacific Islander population. It's kind of this hidden group that struggles with food insecurity. I don't know about y'all, but I live in Arkansas, so people have said some crazy things to me, but Asian people are viewed as like the model minority, which is problematic for so many reasons. But when it comes to, I know I will speak for myself and my family, the pride associated with seeking assistance, getting assistance, being treated fairly through the process, is often challenged when we needed help. I know that my mom, she's a college grad. She was working as a CNA. She was not making a lot of money. We applied for CalFresh, and we only qualified for about $17 a month for the two of us at the time. And she, had taken multiple days off of work to go into the county office and to apply and to get her paperwork in and to do all of the things that you need to do, which is a long list of things that you need to do and paperwork to turn in to verify that you do qualify for SNAP. And to get that felt like a big slap in the face. So I work directly with SNAP eligible Arkansans. I also work with the state administration to try to figure out how we can better serve SNAP eligible Arkansans. And I also work as a lobbyist, a registered lobbyist for whatever that is worth, during our legislative session, which just ended last month. And our state is doing a whole lot to limit access to just any sort of supportive programs. So before I start ranting about the legislature, I'd love for Jeff just to show a quick video about what SNAP can do. I tried to find one where there were some people in California and I couldn't. This is the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. They are a think tank, and they help us collect a lot of good information about the program. But this is one of their videos about why SNAP is so important and why we needed to increase it during the pandemic.
Without SNAP in place to support families, I don't really see any other ways that they're going to be getting food besides going to a food bank, which are nearing max capacity at this moment.
During this public health and economic emergency, we must protect families' ability to afford nutritious food.
I don't think people realize how important the SNAP benefit is to so many Americans.
SNAP is a huge difference maker in lives across the United States. Choosing to feed your family should not be an option in any household.
Strengthening SNAP will avert food insecurity among families with lost earnings or whose unemployment will drag on.
Without SNAP, I wouldn't know where my next meal was coming from.
A boost in the SNAP benefits would mean I would feel more food secure, and my kids are eating healthy.
I want the politicians to know that there are these cracks that people fall into and they're not able to work. And what are we going to do, just deny them food?
An elevated need for food assistance will persist far beyond this health crisis.
Without SNAP, millions of Americans like me would have to make a choice between eating and paying the rent.
SNAP is my family's main source of healthy food, and that's true for a lot of people in my neighborhood and kids in my school.
Congress can act now to help families by increasing SNAP during the downturn.
Thank you. So just a little bit of background, SNAP was designed as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It was initially meant to supplement some of the food needs that people had. The way that they identify the amount of money that people would be eligible for is based on this old model called the Thrifty food plan, where they took into consideration at the time how much it would cost to make a basic meal. That Thrifty food plan has not been updated for decades. And you can see that the increased prices of food, the increased hours that families are working, the limited time that they might have to prepare meals, and then the limited resources that families might have in preparing those meals, including being able to pay for your utilities or having the proper equipment or a clean and safe cooking space. All of those things are big barriers. But at the end of the day, SNAP is an entitlement program. And some people think that that is like a bad word. What it means, though, is any person that qualifies for the program is eligible and will get benefits. There's no pot of money that will go away. If I apply for benefits, I am not taking it away from somebody else. There is enough funds to serve the people in need. With that said, the benefits are meager, and we know that they equate to about 40 cents per person per meal, I think. And we also know that a lot of people don't use SNAP as a supplement to their food budget, that this is the entire money that they have to spend on food every month. So it's good to know that the federal government is responding to a public health and a financial crisis in the way of lifting SNAP benefits, because we know that when you put dollars in people's pockets, when they get to choose the food that they want to eat, they are more likely to be, closer to food security. But the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance, we all work on all of the federal nutrition programs. So those include the National School Lunch Program, National School Breakfast, out of school meals. We work with our WIC partners, and shockingly, or not so shockingly, we are one of few states that does not take advantage of many of the flexibilities that would allow us to serve a larger population that we know need assistance. Yeah, I feel like that is a good place for me to stop, because I've said a lot of words. And I imagine that some of you all are experts in this work, from, just knowing people, having people in your family that have received public benefits or tried. But I'd love to just kind of pause for a second and either get some feedback from you all about what you're interested in hearing about, because I could go into, the weeds of SNAP policy, which I don't think anybody wants to hear about. But I would also love to talk about, what concerns you have for either, certain populations or what you've seen in California, because I know it differs very much from state to state how these programs are administered. Are people still discouraged from being on the public? Oh, okay, great question. So public charge was an executive action that the Trump administration took that changed like long lasting, solid immigration policy. Basically, what the public charge rule that was fought immediately and eventually defeated said is that if you are seeking citizenship and at any time need to turn to, there's a certain number of public benefits programs that this applied to, but SNAP was one of them, that would count against you in your application to become a citizen. And the way that it's horrible and ugly, just the name of it, public charge. Like, they're saying that you are charging the public for your existence because you need to access some sort of public benefit, which is just wrong. But that rule was overturned. But we still see the chilling effect of that rule in a lot of places. I mean, food pantries, we saw people not applying for WIC, which was not a part of the public charge rule at all. We saw people avoiding applying for SNAP that were absolutely eligible. And we still get this question. And that's what happens when we have these massive policies that push people away from programs that really are to help people. Arkansas was one of the last states that got rid of the felony drug ban. So there was a while between 1997 and 2017, if you were a person who had a drug trafficking, manufacturing, or distribution charge on your record, after the year 1997, you were disqualified from the program for life. I don't know about y'all, but I want every person, regardless of their experience in the criminal justice system, to be able to eat, and to survive and not turn to, other negative experiences because the federal government and the state government don't see them as human beings that deserve to be supported. So I could talk about SNAP all day, but I want to know if there are other specific questions. That public charge question is great. I will tell you that the Western Center on Law and Policy, I think is the name of it. Let me pull it up. That they are, Western Center on Law and Poverty. They're probably one of the most knowledgeable groups when it comes to what's happening at the California state level. They're also very engaged with federal advocacy. I was able to be on a call last week that was like a listening session with the Food and Nutrition Service, which is the arm of the USDA that administers SNAP. They're looking at updating the Thrifty food plan, which is awesome and could also take a while. So we have a comment period, a public comment period, open until June, that I'm happy to send information out to you all about. It's great to hear from folks that have experience with SNAP and don't have experience with SNAP, just saying that, yes, it's time that we update the Thrifty food plan and we should consider these things. It was really great to hear from some folks lifting up the issues of how cultural foods are not prioritized when we are thinking about the Thrifty food plan. Some of the halal foods can be more expensive. If you are, allergic to certain things, or if you don't eat certain things, you can have a hard time navigating how to use your SNAP benefits effectively when so many things are like advertised at you in your food environments. But I think that, the other things that we lifted up, and I know this isn't a very sexy topic, but when I worked with the older adult population, it was, why do we get the minimum benefit, and why doesn't SNAP pay for toilet paper? And why doesn't SNAP take into consideration the things that I might need to buy to keep myself and my kitchen clean, like, storage materials and cleaning products and hygiene products? All of those things cost money. And if we can take that into consideration, whether it's adding those items to be purchased by a SNAP EBT card, or it's taking into consideration that cost that some households will have in addition to their food costs, that needs to be, worked into the calculation. But that that makes sense to me. And I embarrassingly, on the Thrifty food plan listening session, said, what goes in must come out. So I brought poop up somehow on a federal listening call. But it's the truth. And I think that they need to hear that we need support with more than just food. And all of these other programs too, like rental assistance, unemployment, housing assistance. All of these programs are designed to be challenging. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever had any experience with this, the wait times are crazy. The criminalization of being poor and needing assistance is absurd. Within the SNAP program, that has like one of the least, the SNAP program has dedicated billions of dollars to track fraud and trafficking. And we know that this program is doing exactly what it needs to. If we could spend that money somewhere else to improve the program, I think we would have a much more effective program. But just like over policing happens out in the community, especially for people living in poverty. One ticket could turn into a warrant, could turn into an arrest, could turn into all of these kinds of court fees. The same thing can happen in SNAP. There's an over policing of benefits, and an over policing about things that could be a mistake. I mean, we're talking about a federal program. When you look at the application, we just moved from a 4-page application to a 32-page application, going back in time because they wanted to integrate Medicaid and T, which is fine. But if I saw a giant book of papers that I was required to fill out to get a bit of food assistance, I would avoid it. And that's, I think, kind of the main reason they're pushing people to do the online portal. But this is something that just sucks, if I'm being real honest, because we've done so much work to try to make this process easy for SNAP participants. Luckily, California has, I know that Fresh EBT is one that's a federal online, like an app where you can check your benefits, but CalFresh specifically has an app where I believe you can submit your information and work with a case, like work with a county office from that app. So modernizing is the way to go. And Arkansas is just, taking steps backwards. And there are national groups that are focused on eliminating these programs. And I'm going to name them and let you do your research if you want to. But the Foundation of Government Accountability and Opportunity Solutions Project are two groups that one is like the think tank arm and one is the lobbying arm. They send people out to write legislation that really just, punishes people who are recipients of SNAP. So this last legislative session, we saw child support enforcement as and compliance as a requirement of eligibility. We know immediately that is taking power away from parents who are doing everything they can to co-parent. We will see people not apply for benefits because they do not want to deal with the Office of Child Support Enforcement. There was another one where the public housing authorities must prioritize applicants who have open child support cases that are compliant with them before other households. It's all based on these assumptions and these wrong assumptions about why people are living in poverty, right? I've never met a person who is like, this is sweet. I love not being able to pay for my bills and not being able to get enough food on the table for my family. And it's a joy to apply for SNAP. Never have I met that person. With that said, it is very ugly when it comes to the state legislation around especially food assistance, because there is an assumption that food banks and food pantries can do the work. And we know that the federal nutrition system and programs dwarf the amount of help that food pantries offer. Food pantries are great. We want them to be around. We do also want dollars to go directly into people's pockets so that they can make the choices that they want to make for their family. I said I was going to pause and I didn't pause. So I'm going to stop talking and see if there are any questions, comments, concerns. Are you fired up about SNAP policy? Do you want to come to Arkansas and fight this with me? Talk to me.
Tomiko, I wanted to ask you, what are with the new administration, are there any new policies that you see coming up with the Biden administration improving SNAP as a national program?
Yes, I think that Biden's administration is overwhelmed with kind of putting things back together. But they are also doing an excellent job of I mean, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities that made that video, their food assistance director is now the FNS undersecretary, which is a huge deal. She's a SNAP advocate. So we know that we've got somebody that's in the federal system that's going to lift up all the things that we want to be lifted up. But yes, I do see that Biden has some opportunities to make food assistance and general assistance more widely available. And we've seen that in some of the most recent updates. So like pandemic EBT, I know that California was one of maybe the first state to get benefits out to people. And for those of you who don't know what pandemic EBT is, it's a horrible name, Pandemic and Electronic Benefits Transfer. But really the goal was to get the federal dollars that are used for school meals onto a card for households to be able to spend, because schools were shut down or kids were virtual or whatever it was. Many students were unable to get the meals that they rely on every day, 2 meals a day at least. So pandemic EBT was a response to that. And it was a fairly effective response. They are going to offer that program through the summer now, which is an update, and that's exciting. That's something we've been pushing for a long time. Our ultimate goal is universal free meals, so that no parents have to turn in any paperwork to show that they qualify for free or reduced meals, but we just feed every kid for free. And I would say that would be really great to work into the college setting too, as well. We know that many college students struggle with food insecurity, and what used to be expected, that you were just going to eat ramen and like party all the time or whatever, like now it is a much bigger issue. The cost of college is much higher. The cost of living is much higher. And there are students that are doing the best that they can to take themselves to the next level that can't feed themselves. So we've seen a rise in college food pantries. As a student, it can be really hard to qualify for SNAP, depending on the hours that you're taking, if you're able to work, all of those things, if you have children. So that's a population that is, I would feel very comfortable saying that they are underserved. Oh, that's good to know. And UC Davis is like a big ag college, right? So
yeah, ag, coffee, wine.
Yes, the good stuff. So that's good to know. I mean, like, and I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at building a system that prioritizes the needs of the hardest to reach person, then we are probably going to build a system that serves everybody fairly equitably. Again, these programs have roots in white supremacy and in the idea that a person is deserving or undeserving of help. And to overcome that, sometimes it can take years and years and years of advocacy. But we're very thankful for our lawyers and for the folks that are fighting at the administrative level, you know, through appeals and all of that kind of stuff to prove that people are doing what they need to do, and that we shouldn't be criminalizing them if they make a mistake or if the agency makes a mistake, which ultimately impacts the applicants. In Arkansas, we see that the 60 and older population usually get the minimum benefit, which in Arkansas was $15. And we have a really big issue in the state with older adult food insecurity and poverty. We also don't allow people to save over $2,250 or $3,000 $500 if you're over 60. You can't have assets more than that, which during this last year, it seemed like we were going to be able to change that legislation because we saw so many people who were forced to turn to their savings because they didn't have the ability to get to work or they had to care for a loved one. So, you know, I think while the very super majority state legislature is picking away at these programs, death by 1,000 cuts, the people who are most impacted by these cuts are children and older adults and people who have a disability. Those are also people that are typically unable to go up to the Capitol and testify in committee and stay up to date on some of these things. I mean, kids should not have to be tasked with that at all. But again, we know SNAP works. We know it can work much more efficiently, and that's the role of the Alliance. At least my role at the Alliance right now is we've got a senator in our state, Senator John Bozeman, who is now the ranking member of the Senate Ag Committee. So some of the upcoming things that will happen are a farm bill likely in 2023. That's a massive piece of legislation that includes everything from like farm subsidies to SNAP benefits and how these programs work. I've only been through one farm bill cycle as an advocate, and I can tell you that it feels really weird and it's a marathon and it will always be a marathon. But any experience that you have, either, you know, personal, living in poverty, those stories are really important to hear. I mean, the narratives about people in poverty are wrong and we need to challenge them. Most of the people that I've helped apply for SNAP are the hardest working, most generous, kind, loving people that I've ever met. They're also so scared of taking away benefits from somebody else, which shows you how some of the messaging has landed within the SNAP population, that you have to be living in abject poverty. It's an emergency by the time that people show up to DHS and apply for SNAP sometimes. And we don't want that to be the case. We want people who, you know, are not at $0 in their bank account to apply for SNAP if they qualify. And there's a lot of education that we have to be doing and outreach to make that known and to make sure that people know their rights in the process. Jeff, do you have any other questions for me?
Well, if anyone else has a question, actually, I have a former colleague. Oh, Elizabeth does. There she is.
Yes.
So I noticed that as soon as the pandemic started, at least here in California, there was like a huge shift that allowed anyone in the schooling system, like preschool through 12th grade, to be able to get a free bagged lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, to me, that was always like, why hasn't this always been the case, right? Because there's children who get turned away if, you know, they have a outstanding bill with the school cafeteria.
Right.
Like, how can we do this now, but we haven't been able to do this in the past years? So there's no like children should always have a meal to go to. Like sometimes these kids depend on like their school meal is like their secure meal, right? That's like the guaranteed meal.
Yes.
That I just wanted to say that, like, I noticed that because I remember being in grade school and like some kids being like, you know, food trays being taken away because they had an outstanding bill, and
or like graduation cap and gown being withheld because there's some balance that hasn't been paid. Yeah, that's a huge issue. And the school lunch debt would go away if we did use the universal free meals model. And you're right, that is what happened when the pandemic happened. Here, come grab this food, it's available for you, there's money for it. And it was like instantaneous almost. So we know that it's available, we know that it's effective, and we know that that it can be done, and it will help people. I think what we also recognized is the models of getting that food to people is not as accessible as we would like it to be, right? Often you'd have to here you would have to get in the car, go to your school location at a certain time between these hours to pick up your bag of lunch, and then go eat it off-site because you couldn't eat it on site. That can be a challenge if your parents were not able to work from home, or if you didn't have, transportation to go get to go get that meal. But that's an excellent point. We can do it. We know it's effective. We have this like kind of by accident year-long case study of what it looks like to have universal free meals. And would you look at that? The world did not explode. So I think that is something that we're discussing a whole lot with our within the states. Just, how do we keep pushing for this? How can we show that the benefits greatly outweigh the cost of the initial implementation? And then I think we also have to be thinking outside of the box and really kind of I don't want to say like fantastical thinking, but you have to, in order to be a person who is, working towards activism or fighting for justice, or you have to think beyond what's currently been done. And I think that all of us have that imagination to identify what an ideal food system that is just and equitable looks like. And if after this conversation you would like to have another conversation about specific actions that you can take, I'm happy to make time for that. I'll put my cell number and my email in the chat. But I think that some of the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, and that is just not happening at this moment. The people who are making the decisions maybe have never experienced living in poverty or going without a meal, and we need folks that understand and in depth understand public benefits access and know how inequitable it is to be at the table making those decisions. So this is a plug to vote for the people that you believe in, to challenge when somebody says something that is just not correct about people who are living in poverty. And I think the other big issue, especially in Arkansas, is this idea of the paradox of obesity and food insecurity, that, you can see a person, they are obese, and the immediate assumption is that they are eating too much, right? In reality, obesity could be a symptom of the lack of access to quality foods that they have in their area. We know that the cheapest items at the grocery store, and oftentimes people here are shopping at the convenience store or the dollar store or whatever's closest to them to make their meals, prices are hiked up, and the cheapest items to purchase are high carb, high sugar items. So it's just, it can feel and does feel overwhelming to think about how to adequately address this issue. But I think my pursuit for figuring out why things are the way they are has pushed me to go to law school. I want to understand how to deconstruct so we can construct, is that it? The systems that are not working for people who need them, who need help. So I'm gonna stop talking again, but I really thank you all for this opportunity and for some of the reactions that I've seen to what I've said. But I'm all on board for universal free meals. I think everybody that is hungry should get a meal regardless of their anything. Hungry people should be able to eat, period.
Yeah, I agree. I like the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
You said something at the beginning of your talk about a decades old formula, I think it was, for figuring out how much money to allocate, and I didn't get the name of that.
It's the Thrifty food plan. And I will send Jeff my links after this if you are able to send those out, because the Thrifty food plan took into consideration that women typically were at home with kids and that they had all of the time in the world and all of the knowledge about how to prepare meals, and based things on commodity items like a bag of grain, a bag of rice, box of potatoes, whatever it is. Like that just doesn't work these days. We need convenience foods to be a part of the equation when we know that parents are working long hours and that they're turning to those anyway, but they're just not able to pay for them with their SNAP benefits.
I wanted to say too, like when you said about convenience stores, because when I worked with like CalFresh, actually my former colleague Vanessa, she's in the Zoom as well. We both work for CalFresh Nutrition Ed, and we know there's like a lot of food deserts out there, and the only thing available are convenience stores where, like you said, hiked up prices on like milk. Milk could be like $5 to $6, especially around here, per gallon.
Right.
And just in general, how many, like, are there a lot of food deserts in maybe not Little Rock, but just Arkansas in itself? Do you know
yeah.
that? Okay. Like
the entire state. So what is it? Secretary Vilsack used this thing called like persistent poverty counties. And in Arkansas, we have 75 counties. 48 of those counties are identified as like persistently in poverty, meaning for over 40 years, the median income that folks received was at or below the poverty level. That's just to show you some of the need here. But with food deserts, you can, in Little Rock, if I go a couple blocks that way, then I'm going to be in a food desert. So there, and it ranges. But what I have seen in these very rural areas of the state is horrifying. Also, just another plug for changing the Thrifty food plan. We are encouraged to make people in poverty are encouraged to make the best use of their dollars. But in order to do that, you often have to buy in bulk, but we don't have enough money to be able to buy in bulk. So I think that there are, all of these things that don't match up with each other. And in a state that is as rural as it is, the quality of food at certain stores is awful. So that's another thing. Am I going to spend $6 on fruit that looks like it's been sitting out for 2 weeks? No, I'm not. I'm going to spend that $6 on something that I know for sure my kids are going to eat and like. I think that there's so much risk involved, and y'all that worked with the CalFresh, SNAP Ed stuff can tell that there's a fear of spending money on foods that you're not sure if your kids are going to enjoy or that you will enjoy. That's a risk, because once you've made the meal, then you kind of have to eat it, right? So there's, I think that that's a luxury that I am very aware of these days. I've made plenty of meals that have been horrible and I've had to throw them away, but I had the luxury of doing that because it wasn't my last dollars for food. So I think that that needs to be included too. There needs to be some room for, if we're going to encourage people to incorporate fruits and vegetables and produce into their diet in a more frequent way, then we need to be offering them some flexibility on how to do that. And some, you know, double up food bucks is one of those ways where you get double the benefit at a farmer's market, where $10 of SNAP benefits, you know, get you $20 worth of fresh fruits and vegetables.
That's what we have here, at least in San Jose. Yeah.
Do you have it at grocery stores too?
Not that I know of, but the farmers market, like in San Jose, they'll give you, if you use CalFresh or your EBT, they'll give you a certain amount of, like, they call it carrot money or something like that. But it gives you extra like $10. I don't know if it's double, but they give you like extra money if you use your EBT.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that is something that is administratively kind of a headache to apply for, but in practice, you know, works. It also, you know, we have to take into consideration that that's changing a shopping habit big time, right? If you're not used to going to a farmer's market, I know the first time I went to a farmer's market, I was a little bit intimidated by all those people talking to me and, you know, hey, you want to buy this? You want to buy this? It's like, oh, I don't know what to do. But you know, these things take time. Any behavioral change takes time. And with food acting, I mean, food is love in the South, and food is love. And I know in my family and in my culture. And when we deprive people access to food, I don't think we're doing our society any sort of justice. So, and it's a super sensitive topic. I know that y'all that have worked on SNAP Ed have probably been smacked down by some of the people that you worked with, because I think that that program too assumes a whole lot about SNAP participants, that they don't have, you know, this expertise. And some of the people who show up to our Cooking Matters classes or our Nutrition Ed classes they've been cooks for 50 years. They have, you know, this amazing experience and expertise to bring to the table that's not really considered. So I think that we are on the right track. There's a lot of momentum right now to update these formulas, these out-of-date formulas, these to think differently about these programs and who qualifies for them and how to access them. So like let your mind go wild about what a food system that is equitable looks like, because we know that the current system is not it. And we got to get pretty creative in order to overcome this history in our country of only feeding people that we think deserve it.
Any other questions besides from me? I have a lot, but you know, and we're close to our time. Vanessa, hello. I saw you turn your camera on. Do you have any questions? I don't know if you did.
I don't. I'm just really excited to hear the work that you're doing and think it's really inspiring. And I have worked in this field, and it can be really heartbreaking. So I'm excited that things are moving forward in some ways.
Thanks. Yeah, at the end of the day, we're talking about people, human beings. And it can, when you're in the weeds of the policy, it can feel really distant. But, you know, when you're sitting there with a person who has been trying to get SNAP for months and you can help them with that process and you successfully get a benefit, it's a huge win. So lots of work to do. I really appreciate you listening to me blabber on about this. Please contact me if you have any questions or if you just want to ventilate about the issues.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tomiko, for coming. I want to respect people's time. It's 2:00. Thanks for joining us. And I know we can talk about it. I think probably me and Vanessa for sure, since we work in that same field, we could talk about it. And Ellen seems to have a lot of questions and comments too. Seems she knows a lot too. But thank you for joining us, Tomiko. And our next one will be next Thursday at 1 p.m. Same time, same Zoom channel link. And everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
I'll send those links out.
Everybody. Good to see you.